Du veas colom yugo preveo lascivus amor et pudicitia se eligo quod video colum iugo preveo ad iugum tamen suave suave transeo.
Good day. I'm Father Tom Foley from the Immaculate Conception Church in Winchester, and I'm pleased to have this opportunity to be here at the WinCam studio to introduce this program that the Winchester community recently sponsored on Islam. I'm very happy to be joined here by Father Raymond Helmick, the Society of Jesus from Boston College, who, along with Professor Kamar al-Huda, was a presenter on October 18th, 2001, at the McCall School Auditorium on the Islam presentation. And we'd like to now introduce that program for you and discuss a little bit about what happened on October 18th.
The evening itself was at a very key time in American experience. And the audience we had here did represent so much of the American public. Just in the first month's recovery from this traumatic experience of the 11th of September, we really felt that the presentation that was here and the way the audience participated in it was something that ought to be seen by other people, that people in schools, in a lot of different settings who wanted to deepen their appreciation of Islam. For most Americans, a very strange foreign thing, although there are quite a number of Muslims in this country. We have not been conscious enough of them, and to realize that our fellow citizens, people that really ought to be our friends and we ought to know better, have been through a much more traumatic kind of experience than the rest of us. That's one of the things that we need to treasure up as a lasting experience from that trauma that we've all been through together.
What we are going to see, it's in several parts. We're going to see a film of the program on October 18th at the McCall School. You, Ray, and Kamar have a wonderful dialogue back and forth for about 1 hour discussing Islam. And we should mention here that Kamar, of course, is a Muslim himself of Pakistani descent, but born and brought up in Queens, New York. The two of you share for about an hour, and you get into some very important concepts. Jihad, also how Islam is a monotheistic religion like Christianity and Judaism, and the commonality that is there, as well as some of the real differences. And following the presentation, we have a question and answer period, which was rather interesting.
Yeah. Do you know, Kamar and I know each other quite well now. We've been good friends for 4 years now that he's been teaching at Boston College. And it's interesting that each of us has had a lot of experience of the other's religion. I've been a great deal around the Middle East. Various Middle Eastern countries have gotten some sense of the experience of people in those countries and how they respond themselves to the critical issues that affect them and us. Kamar, growing up in the United States, growing up very American Muslim, He knows us, the rest of the American public, the Christian and the Jewish part of the American public, extraordinarily well. I know a lot of other American Muslims that I've gotten to know through my interests and community with their interests in the Middle East. And in fact, we have shared in an organization that is directed towards peace in the Middle East, the U.S. Interreligious Committee for Peace in the Middle East, among American Jews, Christians, and Muslims, a lot of effort to come to the kind of mutual understanding that we're talking about in this evening's discussion. I think that we should be able, through this discussion, to help people get some idea of how we resolve the conflicts among us or transform them into a better understanding.
We do hope that that will help you who view this to see it as something constructive after the terrible tragedy of September 11th, some positive way to try to have some information and understanding shared, and also that in general, how people can try to find positive ways to bridge gaps and to find commonality and understanding and respect for each other along with their differences. So thank you for joining us, and we hope you enjoy the presentation.
Good evening and welcome. I'm Father Thomas Foley from the Immaculate Conception Parish, and I've been asked to say a word of introduction here this evening as we gather for this program on Islam, a great world religion misrepresented by terrorists. This evening's program is being sponsored by several groups, by the Winchester Interfaith Clergy Association, by the Parent to Parent Group, the Friends of the Winchester Library, and the Winchester Multicultural Network. And I would like to just single out Sandy and Anne Marie from the Multicultural Network for really helping to bring this evening together. Also, we're very grateful to Principal Evander French for opening up the McCall Auditorium for us tonight and for hosting us here. And to Ed Colosi from WinCam, local cable, who's filming this for us. So we're very grateful to everyone who's had a share in planning this evening. We have two presenters this evening. They're both from Boston College. Father Raymond Helmick, who is observing his 50th anniversary with the Society of Jesus. Congratulations, Father Helmick. Father Helmick is with the theology department at Boston College and has for many years been involved in peace negotiations internationally in a number of different areas in Northern Ireland, the Middle East, Kosovo, and other places. So he really is expert in conflict resolution and international diplomacy, and so he's going to give us a wonderful, broad overview of that whole area. And Father Helmick is not a stranger to many of us in Winchester. He's spoken here before at different times on different things, and he's certainly not a stranger to Marie and Steve Barry, his sister and brother-in-law, who live here in town. And we thank the Barrys also for helping us to bring this evening's program together. Professor Kamar al-Huda, also at Boston College, professor of theology and professor of Islamic studies. And Professor Huda grew up in Queens, New York.
Good.
So the tragedy of September 11th has a very personal connection for him, as he has many friends in New York. And so we're very grateful to both of our presenters for being here this evening and for taking some time out to come to Winchester and to try to give us some perspective and some information, some education on Islam and on this whole crisis that we're all caught up in at the moment. They're going to kind of pass it back and forth between each other, the two professors, in kind of a conversational approach this evening. And after they have made their presentations, they certainly would welcome questions from the audience. And the way that we're asked to do that, if you have a question, is to please come to this microphone that will be over here in the right-hand aisle. And that way, your question can be heard, and it also can be taped by Ed Colozzi. So don't be shy. If you have a question for professors, feel free to come to the aisle on your right-hand side and approach that microphone, kind of just make a little line there, and just take your turn at the microphone to present your question. And we expect the whole program would go about
an hour and a half.
About an hour and a half.
Yeah.
So we should be finished by about 9:20. Right. Thank you all for coming.
Great. Well, I'm going to start, and may I also thank you all for coming. I'm astonished at how many of you are here. It's very good of you to come on out. Professor Huder and I'm going to say Kama.
Sure.
Say Ray, please.
No.
We've talked together a few times, and we see a lot of each other, of course, on the theology faculty. We talked tonight on the subject of Islam, about which I know a whole lot less than he, naturally. But I want to give you just an initial perspective. Coming as a Catholic priest into a lot of Muslim company, I've worked a lot in the Middle East. I've worked with both Israelis and Palestinians. I've been a fair amount in Lebanon. And those, in fact, were very different situations. When I dealt with Palestinians, there were Christians and there were Muslims, a lot more Muslims than Christians. But it was not a problem between them. And their identity was so much as Palestinians that they were both, Christian and Muslim, able to relate to each other with a great deal of ease. When I got to Lebanon, that was some time afterwards. First time I was up there was 1982, and there were Christians and Muslims at war with each other. The war didn't really straighten out altogether as a war between Christians and Muslims, but the two sides were so much identified as that I found myself for the very first time in my life having to ask questions of myself. There were theological questions, and there were also really very personal questions. I was meeting Muslims all the time. I was meeting several kinds of Muslims. The mainstream Sunni Muslims, Shiites. I was also meeting Druze. And I would find that it was very easy for me to talk about the spiritual riches of Islam. You know, that trickles off the lips ever so easily. And I had to ask myself, what am I saying? What do I believe about this? Do I see all of this, or am I making believe? And it was a kind of question that I had to solve for myself. And the way I did it, I talked this over with every, both Muslim and Christian I talked with. And I understood something about what a monotheistic religion has to say. I belong to one. I really believe in it. I know Jews. I was getting to know Muslims. And I knew that there is something that monotheism has to say to us that is quite different from what the ancient, at least, pagan world believed. For the ancient polytheistic Greek and Roman world, what was religion about? Religion was the answer to their questions about their lives. And what it had to say was that the world is a terrifying place. It is full of forces. They personified these. The personification isn't the important part of it, but the forces of sun and rain and drought and war and race and all of these things personified as gods and goddesses who were jealous of one another, who were unreliable, who were indifferent to us at best, hostile at worst. That was a terrifying world to live in. The practice of religion, it was a very religious world. Religion was really a kind of bribery. You had to buy off all these gods and goddesses, all these forces to try to hold them away from harming you. And you could defend yourself, those who were closest to you in your family, those who were of your kind, at best something like a nation, but you knew that sooner or later you lose, they're going to get you. Terrifying world. And the basic fact of the monotheisms, all of these three monotheisms, which come from the same origins, Jewish, Christian, Muslim, is that none of that is really true. That God as one, God is one, and that means the world makes sense. It is the world of His making, and He made it for us. He did not make it against us. He is not some kind of super monster. He is with us. He is for us. We can rely on Him. That's the monotheism. And then I look at Islam. And I know something about my own religious faith as a Christian. I know that God, having revealed Himself, He hasn't been talking to me. He talked in the origins of our Christian faith, those of us who are Christian. He talked in the origins of Jewish faith, we know. He can hold us, can hold me responsible to live in a way that has been revealed and has come to me through a tradition. I didn't grow up in a Muslim tradition. That isn't the way I receive knowledge of what God has done for us. But I know from my Christian faith that God is free. He can oblige me, but I don't own Him. And we, as Christians, don't own Him, cannot demand of Him that He speak only in the way He has spoken to us. And then I see this Islamic community. I see its faith, I see its pious practice, I see the life of an Islamic community, and I have to, in faithfulness to the God of my faith and tradition, I have to recognize there is God acting among these people. And I have to treat that with respect, even though it's not the way I was brought up. And I'm going to pass it to Kamal, who has the different experience of having lived and grown up in this.
While you were speaking, I was having a fantasy. Good. And one of those fantasies, the part I can tell you, is being back in junior high, back in Queens. And my experiences reflected basically the landscape of New York and American culture, just friends from everywhere, people from around the world, of different traditions and different faiths, in the New York public school system, just very tolerant. It abruptly stopped, or didn't stop, there was a pause. Yeah. I should say, my closest friends were Jewish, closest friends were Christians. Sure, and and I would go to bar mitzvahs all the time. If I had a nickel for every bar mitzvah I went to, I wouldn't have gone to college. For every Christmas, so Christmas was great because I was getting Christmas gifts, and I'm not even Muslim. And then I would get my Muslim gifts for the Eids, the festivities there, and then I would get friends would invite me for Jewish holidays and Sabbaths. So I was one fat cat growing up.
Good.
It was the best of all worlds, really. But December 1979, and I can remember it like yesterday. Friday is our Sabbath. We take the time to go to the mosque and for our services. And this was the weekend after the Iranian Revolution. The hostages were taken. Of course, there was a lot of anger, much like the anger we have now, but on a different scale. And the mosque was vandalized in Flushing, Queens. And I asked my dad, why would someone do this? And he said, well, some people just don't like us. Again, why would someone vandalize the mosque and throw a chair through the windows and so forth and stop us from praying? What did we do here? And obviously we're not Iranians, we don't even belong to that particular Islamic sect. And my dad didn't have answers, of course. He just tried to shun it away and say it was just people who were angry. But all of this paused at that time, which is to identity issues, religious issues, issues of tolerance, issues of how am I going to live here, what type of faith do I have. As I was telling you and your sister and your brother-in-law, that we all had, my friends and I had horror stories growing up, which is not horror, we call them horror stories when we were growing up. One of which is I would go to Sunday school, or Saturday Islamic school, and my friends were going through CCD, and someone else was going through yeshiva, and we would always talk about, well, who got the ruler, and who got this and that. And in my school we had the slipper when you stepped out of line. So we had all these common, not only common punishment, but ways of studying our traditions, which was to memorize and to repeat and to be faithful to your tradition. Of course, we didn't know as teenagers what it would mean. But there was clearly a mutuality, is what I wanted to say. A mutuality between my Christian and Jewish friends and myself. I was going over there, they were going over my house. We were pretty much very close, and religion was not a subject we engaged in, but we talked about it occasionally. One of my best friends turned to be a rabbi and lives in Israel. And I was a fallen pre-med student who then did philosophy and religion. Never allowed to go back home for about a month or two later. So my interest was that. That was a defining moment. I know many people think of the Iranian hostage system. It just happened. Those crazy Iranians, what are they doing? What are they still doing? But the after effects, just as there's after effects and backlashes of what happened last month, makes profound feelings and emotions to people that I think will stay. And what I do usually is I always ask, like many of us here look like, I can't remember it, but if you ask anyone, where were they when JFK was shot? You can usually get a long-winded answer, more than you would expect. And that's the same type of answer one could give as a Muslim American about the Iranian hostage crisis, the Gulf War, and of course last month. Combine all those things together. So I think what I'm wanting to introduce, right, is that the American experience brings in, for a Muslim, not only as your faith as accepted in pluralistic society, accepted, and you're working in a landscape where you are free to do what you wish in terms of faith, but there's a lot more benefits in the interaction. At least I had. I have lots of benefits of knowing the Christian faith, the Jewish faith, Buddhist faith, and so forth.
You describe growing up Muslim in Queens. I think for most Americans, Islam is something in the Middle East. You probably know it much more is in the Arab Middle East. Your family is Pakistan, isn't
Pakistan,
it? Yeah. I don't think most of us think so much in terms of the farther distant Islamic lands, Pakistan, and I guess the largest of all is Indonesia.
Indonesia.
But to most Americans, I think also most Europeans, Islam looks foreign. Strange hats, strange customs, the manner of kneeling, different than Christian kneeling. All of these cultural habits that are different, foreign to Americans and Europeans. And what strikes me is that we have absolutely common origins. Our monotheistic faiths have come out of the same setting, and it's all Middle Eastern. It's out of that world that our Christian and Jewish faiths have come. We've been so Europeanized, so westernized, and so much divorced from the culture of the Middle East that it's by that oddity that a Middle Eastern religion does look strange and foreign to us. And I wanted to come out, would you give us some idea of these origins?
Yeah. Could I also, before we do origins, what says the tangible numbers, which is about 7.5 million Americans are Muslims.
Yeah.
7.5 million Muslims live in America. This is their home. They have no other place to go. They didn't pop up yesterday. The roots of Islam in the States come with the slave trade of the 17th century. The first West African slaves were Muslims, eventually suppressed their name and their culture and religion. But if you go outside of Annapolis, Maryland, about 30 miles southeast, St. Michael's is a graveyard. This is where Kunta Kinte had come in.
Oh, yeah.
There's a graveyard there with lots of slaves whose names are still in Arabic and preserved. The first mosque was in 1919, built in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, and these were by Lebanese Arab Americans. And so from that standpoint, there have been about 4 generations of Arab Americans. And of the Muslim Americans here in the United States, so out of the 7.5 million, half of them are converts, African Americans, Latino Americans, Hispanics, Asian Americans, Caucasian Americans, and so forth. So 50% speak English, and they're from here. They're from a Christian background or Jewish background, or they're from an atheist background. And then the other half are those generations, third, fourth generations, and the 15 to 20% are only immigrants. So again, this concept that something is very foreign, I think should probably be kept in perspective that within the United States, Islam is not a new religion or has a new presence here. Yeah.
I think the reason all of us are talking Islam right now, we weren't talking Islam until the 11th of September.
I only had 15 students in my class.
Yes? You didn't pick up more after that date?
Well,
Or they were already registered?
They're
Yes,
already
this is
registered.
Your term off,
Yeah.
yes. And now, of course, you have the bookstores sold out of Qurans and books about Islam, and people are very interested. And I think we're interested because people are very frightened and have stereotypes, have ideas about what's Islam about. A lot of them very negative ideas. And I think we need to address those. The whole concept of holy war is one that everybody's talking about, and we hear about that. I hear some Muslim spokesmen who will say immediately, well, if it's anything bad, it's not about us. And we all really need to look much more seriously at what the understanding is of war and peace and the justifications of it. Let me just say something. I was talking this with Kamar as we were riding over together tonight, that very often we hear about the separation of church and state in Christian cultures and the unity of church and state in Islam. I've never really believed that's quite true. We've had an awful lot of identification of church and state in Christian history, and there's also an awful lot of civil and religious policy that just goes completely out of sync with each other in Islamic history. But the thing that does stand out is that when Islam began, the Islamic community was immediately responsible for the guidance of the society, civil as well as religious. Whereas in Christian history, it was just the opposite. For the first 3 centuries of Christian history, the Christian community were marginalized, outcast people. They had no responsibility for the life or the safety of the society. And therefore, we could have a vaguely, never explicitly, but approximately pacifist outlook in Christianity. We didn't stay with that. We have had crusades. I think everybody in Washington realized after a while that crusade is not a very good word to be using right now. But we've had those. We have had inquisitions, we've had religious wars that in the 16th and 17th century really produced a very serious alienation of our Christian public from our religious institutions that we haven't yet gotten over. And therefore our Christian relation to war and concepts of war and of really serious, cruel misbehavior in war, we aren't at all clean in approaching this. But the concepts of war, as we look at it in Islam, they have people so frightened right now that I think that's something that we need to pick up on.
Okay. I think, since this is a conversation,
sure,
we can always come back to in question and answer period, but I think it's probably appropriate at this time, before I even speak about war, speak about what Islam is and the peace first.
Yeah.
When the Prophet Muhammad in the 7th century, peace be upon him, had this revelation through the angel Gabriel that God is speaking to him and he is the final prophet. Again, it wasn't revolutionary religion. It was the reaffirmation of this one God. Whereas 98% of the Arabian Peninsula were idol-worshipping pagan Arabs. That was the religious tradition. There were Christians and Jews and Zoroastrians present, and there were also Zoroastrians of the Iranian ancient tradition. And so there was this presence in the religious climate of a monotheistic tradition that there's a God, a one God, because of the Jews and Christians present. The one God, at least Islamically understood, is this God who is beneficent, compassionate, merciful, created the earth so human beings could live here, enjoy the world, but within an ethical principles of life. That life is to surrender to the divine will, to live your life with an ethical code that God has demanded you to. And so those who submit themselves to this God, one God, are called Muslims, who peacefully submit to God, are Muslims. The religion is Islam, which also stands for peace, means peace. So from the point of creation, which is again with Adam and Eve, of course, all these selective individuals since Adam, and all these the Abrahamic traditions, the biblical prophets, all of them are observed as individuals selected by God to communicate to human creation, to communicate, to return and refocus and remember this God, who is the source of all existence, seen and unseen. Every messenger, every prophet, that was the essential message. Jesus is recognized as a profound prophet and messenger. Abraham, Moses, Noah, Jacob, Isaac, so forth and so forth. Okay? All of them are recognized in the Islamic tradition as wonderful human beings, has been selected by God so that people, their community, will redirect their attention to the divine presence. This was lost in the Arabian Peninsula, and Prophet Muhammad was given this message, the final message, as a prophet for his 22 years as prophet. From the year 610 to the year 632, he was given or had the ability to have these images of Angel Gabriel communicating this message. Those messages of 22 years were consolidated and put together, and that's called the Holy Book, or the Quran. Okay, so that's the Quran's holy scripture. And for Muslims at that time, and even till now, that was God's manifest to humanity. God's presence is being in those revelations. Okay? Not in human form, not in any other form, but through these words, through the revelations. Okay? So, in all of these, the Quranic revelations, if you ever read the Quran, every verse refers to either a few things, theological things, it either refers to law, it refers to ethical principles, but it always comes back to, hi Brian, it always comes back to the remembrance of one God, this God who one is accountable to now and a hereafter. So all of these things are in line with the Judaic-Christian tradition. It wasn't considered revolutionary then in terms of a monotheistic tradition. He was always saying, the prophet was always saying, he was reaffirming something that has been given to other prophets. But this is the last prophet of Revelation, and he's the last prophet. It was revolutionary in that climate, in that pagan Arab climate, where infanticide was a normal practice, where there were no rules and regulations for inheritance, at least for women or children, and so forth and so forth. So, theologically, the oneness of God has to be the crucial connection to all the other traditions. And Islamically, we see Jews and Christians as not the other. And it's very interesting in all of our religious dialogue, interfaith dialogue, it's always what the other is saying. And as a Muslim, I find that a very problematic statement, the other. Well, they're not others, at least as a Muslim, because we've had historical relationships. We can marry Christians and Jews. We have this historically with the Prophet and his companions. This, as you had alluded to in Lebanon, this is a common practice. Christians and Jews and Muslims intermarry all the time. The other is problematic, especially the term. And I'm just not getting involved with linguistic issues, but Jews and Christians are referred to as people of the book in the Quran. People who've had revelations, people who have a special status with Muslims because they are brothers and sisters under the monotheistic tradition. Yeah. So from the very beginning, the relationship has been quite close. Unfortunately, since, let's say, 9th century, good ballpark time, it's been very hostile. And I think our relationship with Islam has been thinking of it as that religion of hostility. A religion is foreign, distant, a religion stuck in the Middle Ages, and unable to really move beyond these 20-second image splices of people yelling on the streets, burning down flags since the Iranian Revolution. And it's just beginning to, I think, in recent years, to roll up our sleeves and think about who are Muslims. Every other fifth person is a Muslim. What does that mean for me?
Every fifth of 20% of the world.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I'm going to come back to jihad because I think we are all interested in that now. And I'll tell you my own experience of it. I hear about jihad sometimes from Christians or Jews, from non-Muslims, and the idea that they have of it is this very frightening one, that these are the people swinging those curved scimitars or something, but are hijacking planes, driving planes into towers, all that kind of thing. I hear that from Christians, and I hear something very different from Muslims. The way I hear about it, you understand it, of course, much more deeply than I do. But I hear about the greater jihad and the lesser jihad. And the word itself, the jihad, it's one of the few Arabic words that everybody's gotten to know now. The word jihad has to do with struggle, with effort, and the real jihad is an inner struggle. It's very much comparable to the thing that we would hear about the saints who go through an inner struggle to achieve as much spiritual perfection as they are able. It's very remarkable when you hear about the great mystical saints. My brother is the pastor of a parish over in West Roxbury named for St. Teresa of Avila, who is one of the great teachers of prayer and one of the great mystical holders of great mystical experiences, a very immediate experience of God. The man who was the reformer of the Carmelite men's order at the same time as Teresa was working on the Carmelite nuns, John of the Cross, had other such mystical experiences. My Jesuit founder, St. Ignatius of Loyola, was another man of mystical experience. And when you hear about the mystics, and then you hear about the Hindu mystics, and the Buddhist mystics, and the Muslim mystics, and the Jewish, what comes up is that their experience is so similar that at that level of such direct experience of God, these differences of religious tradition get to have much less meaning that the direct experience of God relating to us has all this much in common. And then I hear about this striving for spiritual perfection. That is the essential meaning in Islam, from all I understand of it, of jihad. It's something that I think we all have much to learn from. And then there is the lesser jihad, which is a self-defense. It's very comparable to what in our Christian tradition has become just war theory. We have a lot of Christians who are pacifist. We have many others who, like myself, really struggle with just war theory and try in every possible way to find alternatives to use of force in any situation that calls for great effort to resist injustice. And that just war theory seems to have its parallel to me in this Islamic teaching of jihad. It is not a matter of casually swinging around those curved scimitars. It is a defensive teaching, defense especially in cases of someone trying to prevent the Muslim from living the Muslim faith. Am I right?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. One of the things I would just add to your eloquent talk on that is what you described is essentially what the Prophet had said. In addition to what the Quran had been compiled and collected, his sayings and customs were also compiled and collected in kind of like in a science. Hadith and
I know another
Sunnah.
word.
Yeah. And so his sayings are very important for our Muslim spirituality to model after him. And one of the things he did say to someone, and I should give you a background, was between the years 624, or well, 620 to 632, the Muslim community was in danger and had to leave Mecca to Medina, the city in the north. And there, the ruling oligarchy was interested in sabotaging the Prophet and his movement, believing that it was a threat to everything. I mean, the cultural norms, the politics, the economics, the religious practices. And one of the things they tried to do is, after they had a treaties, was to assassinate the Prophet several times and his followers. Well, they had to live through war, and the Quran had specific responses to God. Well, I should say God had specific responses through his revelations to this. And one of it, the verse says, "Do not turn your backs and go fight," which is, there are many people who were deliberately thinking about abandoning their faith and leaving the Islamic community and to return to the old ways. Again, to show that all the dependence should be on God, and God will provide, and so forth. Well, there were people who were fighting those who were trying to assassinate the Prophet in various battles. And one individual had come to the Prophet, and he said, "I just come back from the battle," and the Prophet had said, "Now that you've done the lesser jihad, the lesser struggle, you should now go and enter the grander, the larger jihad, which is your inner struggle." And it's exactly what you just said, which is the inner struggle to do good, the inner struggle for spiritual enlightenment, the inner struggle to maintain your prayers on a daily basis, the inner struggle to maintain and work on your spirituality, to work on God's disclosure, to work on one's understanding of and contemplation of God and through the Quran. That is the more grander effort. That takes work. And it also takes work to struggle for doing charity, to doing working for social justice and so forth. These things the Prophet had called, peace be upon him, had called the grander jihad, which is an effort. And I always just say in class, look, it's essentially, the word means a struggle, an effort to do something. So if you want an A in my class, that's your jihad. If you don't want an A, then, and you're thinking of TV and soap operas, and that's your jihad, that's fine. But my jihad here is to teach you something and make sure you have a critical understanding of whatever the material is. And that's how I'm using the word. And so the words that you use, and I just use, spiritual enlightenment, for spiritual perfection, it's a wonderful way of saying it. That's, I see those words day in and day out because my work is on Islamic mysticism. And that word is used in almost every other chapter in my books, in my texts, which is called Jihad an-Nafs, the struggle with one's soul, the struggle with one's life, struggle with one's identity and presence in the world, and spiritual enlightenment. So jihad, I mean, of course, it's taken on all these new meanings after the Crusaders and the Inquisition and the modern world and so forth as holy war. But it pains me to think that's not what the Prophet used the words. That's not what my elders have used the word in the mystical tradition. That's not what 99.9% of the Muslim community uses the word for. Most people who use it, like Osama and Saddam Hussein, are using it for some political agenda.
Yeah. The political agendas, we've had those too. Among Christians, if you think back to the wars of religion at the time of the Reformation, they're ferocious. And what was going on was that people were extremely angry. They were extremely offended. And, all right, I've always believed when we're dealing with that kind of anger, that there is really betrayal of our own faith when we allow our faith to be made over into a vehicle for that. That anger is no part of our faith agenda. And religion gets pretty well hijacked. A co-optation. Religion gets hijacked, say, for nationalisms, for territorial ambitions. Look at what just happened in the Balkans. Look at all kinds of wars. Look at Northern Ireland. But when I looked then at it, I tried to figure out whatever was going on with the 11th of September. And that's what has us all bothered. I look at it this way. I would divide the people that we are concerned about now into three different, very distinct levels. There is a criminal group that are hijacking planes and driving them into our buildings and doing other things, apparently sending anthrax in envelopes now, and who knows what else they'll be up to. That group is of a very limited number. Those are not only angry people, those are also people with a training. They have been very carefully schooled. When we hear about the famous Mr. Bin Laden, for whom we've all conceived a certain dislike, need to understand what he's doing. He's running a school. And his school is very professional, and its graduates are few enough so that we really should be able to identify and round them up and prevent their being the kind of danger we see them as being to us now. At a second level, we talk about countries. At the moment, we happen to be bombing Afghanistan. You hear about vague plans. Are we going to go after other countries? Are we going to start bombing the Sudan, Syria? Those were both mentioned by the president's terrorism expert quoted this morning. What about those countries? How are they involved in this? They're involved at a different level than the conspiratorial group that carried out these actions, these terrible actions. Certainly, Afghanistan, perhaps some other countries, have harbored, deliberately sheltered them. A lot of them are right here in the United States and in European countries, and I don't think we're going to start bombing the United States over it. But the responsibility of these countries is at a somewhat different level. You can probably scale it at several possible levels. There's a responsibility for harboring. We wonder, are they actually sponsors? That's a second degree of it. Or is it conceivable that these countries, their national governments, have actually participated in the planning and the execution of these actions? That's rather improbable, as a matter of fact. It's possible, but not very likely. Then you get to the third level. And the third level is a whole lot of people all over that Arab and Islamic world who have a sense of great injustice that has been done to them or to members of their community. What do we do about that? Those angry people have not flown any planes into our towers. Their anger is over things that we really need to address not be deaf to what they're saying, to their feeling of grievance, but open to discuss with them the reasons for their anger. Here's a very central Christian thing. I think you would find this in Islam too. You get this in our Christian Gospel of Matthew, part of the Sermon on the Mount. If you come to the altar to bring your gift, and you find there that your brother, the gospel seemed not to have caught on to inclusive language, I'm sure they meant the sisters too. If you find that your brother or sister has a grievance against you, leave your gift at the altar. That is no longer the priority. Go be reconciled with the brother or the unnamed sister. Then you can come and bring your gift. That's one of the things that we need to be very centrally concerned with now. We have a country that we are tremendously proud of. We know it as land of freedom, of tolerance, of democracy, of all kinds of good things. Can't even name them all. We have had that reputation throughout the world for practically all of our history. Now there is a very significant part of the world that does not see us that way. We need to talk with them.
Lay down and rest my weary head. Sleep now to dream long is waking up and tired is my heart. Time to carry me tomorrow. Come carry me away. Come carry me away. Time, I'm ready now for come carry me away. Come carry me away. Time, I'm ready now for more.
reputation was
Intrutinamentis dubeas colum iugo prebeo lascibus amor et pudicitia se eligo quod video colum iugo prebeo ad iugum tamen suave suave transeo.
We have a country that we are tremendously proud of. We know it as land of freedom, of tolerance, of democracy, of all kinds of good things. Can't even name them all. We have had that reputation throughout the world for practically all of our history. Now there is a very significant part of the world that does not see us that way. We need to talk with them.
I think we wanted to leave a good
Yeah,
amount
I
of
think
time
we
for-
need to leave our time, plenty of time for questions, and
answers.
we're now at 8:30. We'll be going to, I suppose, about 9 o'clock. So let's have some questions.
I think if you can walk to the microphone.
Good, please.
Shall I?
Good.
That's
You're
all right.
welcome.
I can bend down, I guess, right? Hello, my name is John Guvalaris.
John Rubilatis.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And my mother is full-blooded Arabic, so I speak a little Arabic. I see the meeting seems like the proverbial frog in the fire, where the frog goes in the warm water and he just kind of relaxes, and he relaxes and the fire's turned up more, and before it, you know it, he dies and he doesn't know it. I know a little bit about different religions, the Islamic religion, the Quran, and I see that Buddha and Muhammad and Confucius were men. They're dead. We can go visit their grave sites now. But Jesus was raised and he is alive. He can live inside of us where the other men cannot. There's a profound difference. Jesus is either the biggest hoax or the biggest liar, because he said, I'm the way, I'm the truth, I'm the life, and no man can come to the Father, God, but by me. Muhammad never opened up the eyes of the blind. He never said he was God, and he never raised. Jesus said all those words. So I see if we're going to, and also, I'm not for harming or hurting. Anybody can believe like they want to. But we're discussing religion here now, and there is a vast difference between the Christian religion, Christianity, Christ. He either is who he says he was. See, Muhammad never said he was God. He never said he'd rise again. He never said he's coming back. He never died on the cross for us. So there's a huge religion, a vast difference. How do I have peace when I see every Islamic nation fighting and pulling Christians out of houses, hundreds and thousands, and cutting their arms off in Indonesia, in Sudan. This is fact because of their Christian faith. And if it's a peaceful religion, the Quran does say in chapter 2, verses 190 through 192, it talks about war. It talks about hating the Jews and the Christians. And so we see all of this, and we say to ourselves, don't harm people. Obviously, don't put your hands on anybody. But we see how can I have rest and how can I have peace when the Islamic world comes to me and says, let's all just be happy and you're okay and I'm okay.
Yeah. I'm going to leave you with the Quran text. Good.
I'll sit down, maybe someone else.
Sure. Yeah, I'll leave you the Quranic text there, but let me just say first something about Christian belief in Jesus. As Christians, we're very conscious of Jewish religion. Jewish religion is monotheistic, the one God, and we've gone through a lot of learning experience among Christians over the last about 40 years now, since about the time of the Second Vatican Council. One of the main things we had to learn about was that as really a distortion of our Christianity through most of our history, we had looked down upon Jews, we had dismissed them. The technical word for it is supersession. We had believed that Jewish faith was merely prelude and the real stuff came later with the revelation in Jesus Christ. And at that point, the Jewish faith tradition and its relation to God was kind of canceled out. They flunked the course. They were replaced. Who needs them anymore? What Jewish religion had foretold was seen as having been fulfilled, so now you didn't need them anymore. We've learned that we were wrong. We've learned that Jewish faith in the one God who was revealed to them and to whom they remained faithful retains all of its validity, that it has not been replaced, that the Jews have not been rejected, that God, this is Christian as well as Jewish faith, that God remains faithful to his covenant. They have not been able to accept the Christian teaching of the character of Jesus as Son of God, as manifestation of God. What they have is a constant teaching throughout their scripture, throughout their tradition, that God who speaks to them, who reveals himself to them, always says, it's practically a signature saying throughout the Jewish scripture for Christians' Old Testament. What he always has to say is that you need not be afraid. You should take courage because I am with you. Christian faith sees God who promises, I am with you, expressing that in the person of Jesus, the Messiah. That is something that Jews in faithfulness have not accepted, but the Jewish faith remains valid. Now, we're only learning as Christians to recognize that in the last 40 years after having persecuted Jews for nearly 2,000. If you have Jews looking at Christians, they have got to be asking themselves, well, what do we need them for? because they have their faith. And their faith is something that was revealed to them and which they have as a possession, and which suffices for them. So what do they need the Christians for? There is an exercise by which Jews can recognize a community with Christians in faith. Now, Muslims, with the revelation that they receive, and with the teaching about the legitimacy religiously of the peoples of the book, can look back at both Jews and Christians and say, well, we know what that's about. That really belongs to our faith. Whereas we as Christians, those of us who are Christians, are left looking at Islam and say, well, we already had it. What do we need them for? Where'd that come from? And yet, this is something that I explained right at the beginning of my own presentation. This is something I've had to realize myself as I looked at Muslims and came to some understanding of what was going on religiously and as a matter of faith in their community. God is free. He can reveal himself as he will. I can't dispute with Muslims that God speaks to them, that God is active in that community. Do you want to pick up the...
Yeah. I just am afraid that if I answer about every of those 6 comments, that we won't get to the next question.
Yeah.
So I'll just pick up, and then maybe we can leave time for the next question, which is a lot of the times, if just maybe in 1 minute, a lot of the times in many of these talks is it's kind of this misunderstanding by Christians of who Christ is by other folks. I think it's a grand acknowledgement, I think, when someone wakes up and say, wow, another tradition recognizes Jesus. But not only recognizes Jesus as a profound figure in their tradition. One cannot be a Muslim without being dedicated to the prophets and venerate them as serious prophets. And Jesus is a very profound prophet. He's mentioned over 34 times in the Quran. On the chapter of Mary, he's always referred to as the Son of Mary, the Word of God, and the Messiah. Now, the theological difference, which I don't think we have the real time for, is the Trinity. That's where Muslims and Christians differ. Well, a lot of Christians differ on the Trinity too, but not just the Muslims. Early years of the church fathers, they disagreed on the Trinity. The Gnostics and so forth, the Orthodox Church. So the emphasis on, so it's not the Muslims who have only had a problem with the Trinity. To give you the Cliff Notes version, we don't believe Jesus. We believe in everything what Christians have said. He's cured those who were ill, healed the blind, walked on water, was a profound spiritual teacher, reformer, chosen by God. Where we differ is the moment after the Last Supper, where he was afterwards taken to be crucified. Islamic theology does not acknowledge that God would choose a beloved prophet and then have him crucified. So we don't believe in his crucifixion. We believe at the moment that he was coming, again, this is the Cliff Notes version, he was coming to be taken by the forces, the Roman forces, that he was then taken up by God. And there were imposters who looked like Jesus and who were then crucified. And Jesus will come again as the Messiah. That's Islamic Theology 101, point A2 or something. And also last Sunday, by the way, was Layla Miraj and Isra, which was the evening where the Prophet has his heavenly ascension. Many of you probably know of this night, but that night where he was asked by God to come in dialogue, and he went to pray at the Temple Mount. He did his prayers from there, then he went to heaven. And the first prophet he met was Jesus on his nightly ascension to heaven. So Jesus has a profound theological place, philosophical place. And for the Sufis, the mystics, and all these other mystical Islam, one couldn't be not, people have said, I cannot be a Muslim without my love for Jesus. The love marriage that John have spoken and St. Teresa have spoken. We go to the next question. Okay.
I'm just finishing up Tom Friedman's book From Beirut to Lebanon, and we'll soon start Lexus to the Olive Tree. Wonderful reading, but before the events of September the 11th, I probably would have been reading something else, and you gentlemen probably wouldn't be here this evening. I wonder if you could suggest a couple of books that will help us to understand the Palestinian situation and the Muslim religion.
I would, there's a great scholar, his name is Jack Renard. He was a Jesuit at one time. I'm not sure if he is anymore, but he wrote a book called The Seven Doors of Islam. And Anne-Marie Schimmel, who was a long-time scholar of Islamic studies at Harvard, has written over 30 books. Last name is Schimmel. Books on Introduction to Islam, the Prophet Muhammad, and another great book, so many, authors by Carl Ernst, E-R-N-S-T, and Martin Lings, L-I-N-G-S, What is Islam? So a number of good books.
Yeah. Thank you.
Sure.
Good. Go.
My name is Don Cobble. I'm a minister from Woburn. Unfortunately, this may not go over well, but I'm the minister who spanked his son, got in all the trouble, so that now you don't have to wonder if I'm him. Okay. But I have a couple of questions that or one question basically that I want to present, and I'm struggling because you two are wonderful politicians, but we're talking about major religious issues of which, if you're a Christian, your eternal destiny, if you're a Christian, your eternal destiny rides upon the very thing you said Muslims don't accept. If Jesus didn't die on the cross, the Pope might as well be playing baseball.
I think he does sometimes.
Well, I'm just telling you. So here's my question, because neither one of you have quoted the Quran, but I want you to know, I want the people to hear the Quran Surah, which is a verse in the Quran, 112, verse 3, says, He begets not, neither is he begotten, meaning Jesus was not begotten of God. He was just a man. Again, there goes our faith as a Christian. As you said already, they crucified him not, he was not killed, so there's no atonement for our sin. Okay, that's the other thing. Then you say that you're big buddies with Christians and Jews. Quran Surah 551 says, this is Allah speaking, do not take Jews and Christians for friends, for they're friends with each other. This is out of the Quran. Whoever amongst you takes them for a friend, then surely he is one of them, and Allah does not guide the unjust. Surah 2, 135. And they say, be Christians or Jews, and then you'll be rightly guided. Speaking, this is what Christians and Jews say. But listen to what Allah said to Muhammad. Say unto them, Muhammad, nay, but we follow the religion of Abraham the upright, and he was not of the idolaters. So y'all's view towards us is that we're idolaters. I can live with a difference of religion, but here's my problem. As this other man said at the beginning, the handling of y'all's view of idolaters. Quran, Surah 9.5. When the sacred months have passed, then slay the idolaters wherever you find them. Take them captives. Besiege them. Lie in wait for them on every ambush. If they'll repent and turn from their faith and keep up the prayer and the poor rate, leave them free. Allah is forgiving and merciful. So judge them, Surah 549, the Christian and the Jew, by that which Allah has revealed. Follow not their desires, and beware of them, the Christian and the Jew, lest they seduce you from some part which Allah has revealed unto them. And if they turn you away, know that it is Allah's will to smite them for the sin of others. Okay. I knew I would have this reaction. That's okay. My question is this. Okay. My question is this. And obviously I have more questions, but I don't want to take away from these people's time. The Quran is full of Allah saying to Muhammad, kill the infidels, the idolaters, of which the Quran classifies us Christians and Jews. Now, if you want to tell me that the Quran is not the Word of God, then okay. Otherwise, Osama bin Laden is simply somebody living by his book.
All right. What's probably very interesting at this time is at any point of trying to understand any culture and ethnicity, religion, group, there's a wonderful word called eproche, which is kind of a suspension of one's own obsession of beliefs as the exclusive beliefs. And just for a moment, try to understand the other's perspective from their eyes, from their lens. Okay? And I think that's why I was invited here, right? If I am wrong, let me know. So here's my second, which is the things that you read are fine if you read them that way. Then you're no different from Osama bin Laden. Which is fundamentalist, unable to understand the historical context, and unable to think and connect things from a particular cultural, religious perspective at a certain time. I'll say this clearly. Jews and Christians are not idolaters, and anyone who thinks that are way off base. And I can tell you as a Muslim, we can't be Muslims to think that Jews and Christians are idolaters. They believe in one God. We believe in the same God. The idolaters that they're mentioned over and over in the Quran are what I said before. 98% of the Arabian Peninsula in the 7th century were Arab pagan idolaters. Those references are to them, okay? That's let me complete. And the references to don't take Christians and Jews, this is a very good point. As friends, because whatever you said, is because of this. There were particular incidents, and this was an incident in 629 in Medina, where certain tribes, and again you have to remember this is a tribal society, tribal culture, where there was a sabotage, trying to sabotage the Prophet in Medina. This group of people, at this time, the Quran was responding, who were trying to sabotage and hurt them. And so, instead of trying to appease this, the Quran responded to saying, don't take them as friends who are trying to help you. That doesn't mean all eternity that this is what you don't take them as Jews. There's a particular event, particular time, particular moment of war. That's what the Quran was responding. And I think you can't read the Quran out of context. You can't read it out of its own historical nature. You can't read it out of its own religious theology. So I have to debunk everything you said. Not to, and again, I'm not being apologetic. I'm just saying it's very far from anything you just had said.
So, yes, hello, my name's Frank Cassiani, and we're talking about God in a pluralistic, view that it's the same God, one God, okay? I'm a Christian also, and we believe as Christians, as well as Jews, that God is the God of Israel. He's revealed through the scriptures, which the Jewish prophets wrote on down, even into the New Testament. The difference is we believe in Jesus, and most of them don't. Not all of them. I know some Messianic Jews that believe in Jews for Jesus, but what I think the main thing here for us here to realize is the struggle is Middle Eastern, okay? Now, the Bible says in the first commandment, thou shalt have no other gods before me, okay? So as Christians and Jews, we believe in one God. Okay, the Bible was complete, we believe, as Old and New Testament. The Jews believe in the Old. They believe the Messiah hasn't come yet. But if we take that portion, which we acknowledge, as Christians, and then come into the New Testament with Christ as our Messiah, which says in John, he's the Messiah of the Jews, and into Revelation, it says, this book has been completed. Add no words, don't take away from no words from this book, okay? Muhammad wasn't born until 600 more years later. And it says it also in the Old Testament, in Psalms and Proverbs, don't add to this book nor take it away, lest the plagues be added to you or your life be taken from the book of life. Now, as the other brother Christian of mine said, our faith relies totally on the crucifixion. Okay? So if God says, have no gods before me, and this same God thread is coming down from the Old Testament through David to our Messiah, Jesus, who claims he was God in the flesh. He didn't claim he's just a prophet now. He said, before Abraham was, I am. He said, tell him, I am sent you. And when they went into Egypt, okay, and that nation was birthed, okay, I'm going to try to make this short. Okay, the question is this, that the Palestinian, just one second, the thing in Israel, God gave them a land when he brought them out of Egypt, and he said, go into that land, which was, in those days, Canaan, okay, and God gave that to Israel. The reason, huh? No, I want to ask him his question after. Okay, about the Palestinians. This thing with the Palestinians and the Arabs is that they think that Jews are not allowed to have that land. Okay, and we believe that God gave them that land. Okay, so can you just answer that they allowed that Israel's land?
Could I stay first of all?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Did you want to
I
respond?
think we shouldn't be surprised to find that we have differences among our different faiths. We do come from different religious traditions. We do have some very basic things in common. The unicity of God, the reliance on God who is with us and who is the reason we need not fear. Those are basics. That we have other differences, we really need to be able to live with those. I'll tell you something very Jesuit. I am a Jesuit myself. I don't mean Jesuitical in that sense. I'll tell you, this is the thing that is the most Jesuit about me, what I've grown up with since I've been a Jesuit. It's in the spiritual exercises of Ignatius Loyola, his course of spiritual exercises to come to a decision about what you're going to do with your life. And he starts off by saying that it is really the proper thing for a Christian to save the proposition of the other. We Jesuits sometimes get the reputation of being the people who will win all the arguments and know how to put everybody down. But that's the basic Ignatian proposition, that we save the proposition of the other. That means something really serious that the other knows and believes. And if we find that we can't really save it so that we can say, this fellow is talking something that is not nonsense, then we talk it through with him. We discuss it openly, and not in order to win the argument, but in order to save his proposition. And if we get to the point where we really feel that he is distorting things, then a last step of this is to try to get him around to the point where understanding his own proposition properly, not that we win the argument, but that he saves his proposition. Now, that's very basic. That's not just a way of being nice. It's a way of learning. If I cannot save the other's proposition, if I can't be open to it, I'm never going to learn anything again.
First, I'd like to say I'm from Queens, so I have an immediate connection to you. And my questions will be very brief. What is the Muslims' concept of justice? Is it solely based on retribution like Hammurabi's code, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth? And the second question is, I see terrorism as a reaction to impotency. What would give these people a greater sense of control that they have to operate in the way that they have?
No. Justice is not something that one holds in the hands, one creates. Theologically, God is just, and all things return to God. And of all the names that God has, one of his names is just. But within the Quran, a third of the Quran is Islamic law. And in that law, a lot of it's based upon the things that are very common to Judeo-Christian tradition of feeding the poor, social justice, charity. If one can't afford, it's an Islamic basic tenet, article of faith. If you don't have debts, one needs to pay 2.5% of their income.
But what happens when one feels that they've been wronged?
Yeah,
okay, sorry.
One has to pay through to make sure that the society doesn't have poor people and make sure money is circulated. There are institutions that are set up so that the dispossessed are not forgotten. So justice is not some moral idea that is left over to the jurists, but every individual Muslim has to work toward creating a just society, right? Through law, through everyday purpose, everyday charity, and so forth. In terms of the terrorists, if we're speaking about the same group that I think we're talking about, terrorists, I think, are not just impotent that they need power, they want power. Their perspective in a lot of these, from all aspects of the globes, is that the governments continue, who in their corrupt ways, continue a certain cycle of torture and hate, a cycle of poverty in their own countries. And they continue a cycle of intense marginalization of people. In all of these countries, from the Middle East to Latin America, Southeast Asia, there's very little expression, freedom of expression. So I think all terrorist groups, Middle Eastern or non, are really confronting about changing their society for more intense involvement. That's what I think. And of course, these people are the most extreme versions who did what they did on September 11th.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Agnes Lugira, and I'm a Catholic. I have a comment and then a question. I'll be brief. I know ignorance or not knowing can be a source of a lot of confusion and misunderstandings. Father Helmick, at the beginning you explained that the people from Europe, when they came here and all that, there is a lot of influence that they did not understand that much about other people. But now, America is full of differences, and as we know that. And also, not before the Vatican II did we know about other religions. That was also another source of ignorance. We didn't know much about other religions, and I'm glad there is ecumenism and there is interfaith. And as Professor Kamara explained about Islamic beginnings, I didn't see much difference between Catholicism and Christianity and Muslims at some point. And I would wish maybe we don't need to wait until catastrophic happenings take place in order to realize that there are differences around us and we need to know about them, and we need to learn to respect each other, and so that we don't have all these misunderstandings. Now my question is, how do you two professors advise us from here to go and be vigilant about knowing more about each other, not to stop here, so that we can keep on knowing and be thirst about knowledge about differences among us.
I'll tell you, I'm very glad you asked that. It's a very good thing that we've had this evening. I thought it was really very good on Father Foley's part and all of the other organizations, the library, I haven't even got all the names right in my head, but they've done very well to bring this group together. I said at the very beginning, I was really impressed that so many of you have come out tonight, some of you Muslims, very few of you Muslims, to try to learn something about Islam. I'm the inferior teacher here in that I don't have that myself. But what I do know is that every Muslim is a person of dignity, whose dignity I must respect. And I think that's what you're saying. Good.
I would suggest that, and echo Ray's comments, that this is a time of real self-introspection in so many ways, not just to learn about other cultures and religions, but who we are as Americans, how we treat other people, and how we see the rest of the world. And I think it's long overdue to think about where we stand in the world and what is our relationship with the rest of the world. Yeah. And I think it's very important to think about those things in real hardcore factors. What can cause such a catastrophe? And usually in catastrophe, there's a lot of good that comes out of it. And I'm amazed and encouraged by the intense level of understanding or desire to understand by books. So there's a question here of what books, what things to self-educate. But I think these type of things are very important. I think there should be more interfaith dialogues. Churches, synagogues, temples, mosques need to open the doors more and really start having serious discussions with each other. Not only theological, there should be a dialogue on social justice, questions on AIDS, questions on gender equality, all these issues. It doesn't have to start and end with Scripture. So I think there are a number of ways to work together.
Thank you.
You know, we're getting late enough in the evening. I think we're going to have to get down to the last several questions. So could I ask the people who have been waiting there for quite a while in the line, I think down to this lady, we have to sort of say that's going to be the end of questions. I'm sorry, there are a couple more of you standing up. I was afraid that's just going to keep going on. These last four people, please.
I too have a comment and a couple of questions. I'm a Hindu, so I don't really profess too much experience in any of the other religions that you're talking about. But I do have some personal experience with Catholicism. I went to a Franciscan missionary school, convent school in India, and at the same time I was intensely interested in the other religions, and so I read about Islam, read the Quran. And even then I remembered that what I was reading was a translation, and this is what I say to those of you who misinterpret, that Jesus spoke in Aramaic, which was an ancient language. It wasn't even the Hebrew that people understand today. It's hard to translate. And Islam, no doubt, was spoken in a very ancient tongue, which has been translated and probably corrupted, and who knows what interpretations we can have. And so my message to those who misinterpret and who are angry at Islam is to take a step back and to think that words change as the centuries pass. And the two questions I have, maybe even three, but I'll keep it down, I promise.
Maybe we can have one of the
as
three.
a Hindu, as a pagan who believes in many gods,
You're Hindu.
who has, I think I'm only one, any other pagans in the room? All right, so I was very lucky because I was able to straddle several worlds. I mean, I went to school where I saw Jesus, then I made the sign of the cross. I read the Quran and I said, okay, these are holy words, these are good words. I'd go home and my parents would be ringing the bell and singing their songs and praying with incense and sticks and so on. None of it clashed in my head because I knew what they were talking about was God. Okay, that's what I want to say. Thank you. Thanks. But the question I have, I saw Apocalypse Redux shortly before September 11th. My question is, what is the Islamic view of the apocalypse? Another question, what is the Islamic view on women, on position on women? Because I do know that there's a very good position, but I want to hear it said for everybody. And I also want to know whether you think it's time for a new voice. I don't want to say Messiah, maybe, but a new spiritual voice that will maybe ease the strain that Islam has been facing, which is a very sad thing.
Yeah.
So.
Thank you. And those are great questions and comments. Footnote, Hindus are not considered to fall into the Arab pagan circle.
Right.
So
okay. That's all right.
It's a real religious tradition, and it's a far cry from the 7th century Arabian Peninsula. So, yeah. Okay. Which question should I answer first?
How about from the smaller to the bigger?
Yeah. I think one of the things I would speak about is everyone's interested in the woman question, and of course wants to know where the women stand. And it's very interesting. I'll answer that question Islamically, and there's a lot of legal jumbo mumbo and stuff. But the truth is, in my mind, is within the Islamic law of 7th century and years afterwards, it was seen as things that were altered all of Arabian Peninsula, social customs, gender relationships. Women could inherit whatever they inherited was theirs, and that still is true. And so, my wife, whatever she gets from her family, is hers, and it doesn't contribute to the family's budget. What I earn has to go to the family budget, and that's Islamic law. I think it's a little unfair, but that's Islamic law. Education is, of course, is clear. Business is clear. Being a part, all of our history of the Prophet is from women. The first scholars were women jurists and historians and lawyers. So within the 7th, 8th century, there seems to be clearly a lot more mobility than in the modern world. And I think that's tied to a lot of modern questions. But my question, and of course, what they're doing in Afghanistan is atrocious. I mean, sometimes I have to say that because I think people want to hear it. And I think most people believe that in the Islamic world. Or else other Islamic countries would do the same. And they don't have the same atrocities because it goes against Islamic law. But the question of women is not just about women. It's like, the women are isolated. It's really about men and women in all traditions. What are we doing to each other? How do we perceive each other? And so I think the question about women's rights also speak about men and women's rights in all traditions. I mean, it's not an accident that 4 or 5 countries in Muslim countries have women prime ministers. And it's not by accident they went through the political process. They didn't come from heaven. They actually had a campaign, and they won by popular vote in Turkey, Bangladesh, Pakistan, Indonesia, and so forth. I mean, and as much as we want to vilify these countries as being extremely negative and having atrocious relationships with women because they don't wear tanks and bikinis, they have become politicians and senators and VPs, and they run the stock exchange in many of these countries. So that's that answer.
Now, could you bear with us if we answer one of the 3 questions, and
okay,
we'll give the others a chance. They were lovely questions. Thank you.
Good evening.
Good.
I want to thank you both for coming here tonight and attempting to bring understanding between the people of different religion. I think it's a wonderful thing. But I think it should be carried up further than what we're doing tonight. But before I get to the suggestions, what I would like to have you do, I'd like to point out that I really did not know too much about the Islamic religion until about a month ago. And then I started asking myself questions. Why? Why were the towers bombed? Why did these people commit suicide and believe that they were doing the right thing and crashing those planes and killing the people inside those planes by crashing those planes into the towers? I asked myself why. And the answer that I got from many people around me was that Muslims, the Islamics, they believe in it. Well, I just couldn't believe that was the case. You mentioned jihad. the popular notion is jihad is a holy war. Well, it isn't. So I made up my mind that I was going to find out as much as I could about it. And it was really a revelation as what I learned. Now, I wasn't complete in my study, but I studied enough to realize that the remarks that I heard was nothing but lies. To answer the gentleman who was here a short while ago, Muhammad is quoted as saying that if you hurt a Jew or you hurt a Christian, you hurt me. Christ said it in a different way. Christ said that whatever you do to the least of mine, you do to me. It wasn't too hard to realize that any religion, regardless of whether it's Muslim, Christian, Jewish, or whatever, basically, and fundamentally, they teach one thing: faith, hope, and charity. But many of us don't understand that. We can't appreciate anybody declaring that they believe in faith, hope, and charity in a different manner than we do. And for this, I feel the only people that we can blame are our religious leaders. Every time a crisis comes up, such as what we're experiencing now, where are the religious leaders to condemn it, to object to it, to open up the eyes of the public and say, look, what you're hearing is false. This is the truth. Mm-hmm. We don't hear that. We wonder why bin Laden, whatever his name is, I have to choke every time I say his name. Why? What possesses a man like this, well, maybe about 2,000 or 3,000 followers, to tackle a country like the United States? Okay. There was a very good article in the Boston Herald a couple of weeks ago, and I finally got the answer why all this was going on. Okay. It was strictly political, period.
Yeah. Thank you.
The question is this: we have a commonality in that we believe in one God, one almighty God, one creator that created this earth. Question. Why can't this be built upon by the religious leaders of the world and go out and teach the people that they are really one? They may have different beliefs, that's true, but they are really one. This is what I find lacking, that the religious leaders have lost track of the fact that they are teachers, and they should teach.
Thank you.
Could I just say this? I'd like to simply congratulate you that in these terrible circumstances of the last month, what you've done is not to react in anger, but to try to understand the other. It's the thing we all need to do more.
If you pardon me, Father, I'm scared silly what's happening.
Okay.
I really am.
Can we have the next, please?
Could I just respond also?
On the holy war.
Thank you.
I don't believe in that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I think what you said was wonderful, and I think I agree with you, with everything you said. Leaders do have more of a obligation. Many people don't know what the American Muslim community and their leaders have said afterwards, but there are about 24 that came together by 11:30 a.m. on September 11th that said this: American Muslims utterly condemn what are apparently vicious and cowardly acts of terrorism against innocent civilians. We join with all Americans in calling for the swift apprehension and punishment of the perpetrators. No political cause could ever be assisted by such immoral acts. And this is just the American Muslim community. I can tell you that all Islamic communities around the world, from 56 countries, said similar things. The question, what you said, is how come this is not coming down and coming to levels, and how can it not be executed to places that are obviously that don't have law, like in Afghanistan that has turbulence? And that's not just an Islamic question, it's a global question.
Good, please.
All right, I'm gonna try to make this quick because I know y'all getting mad and stuff. So first, I'd like to say that I don't blame the Muslims or you or your people for what happened to the actions, you know, that happened with. I believe that those people that did that are not Muslims, and I want you to know that the few people, the few Christians, they call themselves Christians, that try to put your religion down. I want you to know that they are not Christians. They are not true Christians.
Okay.
And I just want you to know to keep on doing what you're doing and just try to be the best Muslim you can be.
Thank you.
Good. Thank you. Thank you very much. Good.
Afaf Hamdi, Muslim American, not American Muslim. I have a lot of confusion, but I'm not going to clear it now. I'll clear it after a little word I'll say it. That Prophet Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam said, me and all the prophets like a building, whole beautiful building. When everybody looks at it, he say, wow, what a great building, but it's missing one brick. I am the brick which continues the whole building. This can clear why we are fighting through religions when Muhammad was the last one to continue the link. Okay, my question about confusion. Why the Muslim religion is the fastest growing in this country? Beside all this bad repetition and media and everything about Islam. I'll hear the answer when I'm sitting.
Good. Oh, that's a very good question. That's a very good hadith. Thank you. There's been a lot of reasons to why it's been the largest and fastest and growing and second largest religion in the United States. And a lot of social reasons, a lot of reasons of that transcends ethnicity and time. And like anything that's holy, I think people recognize it, and like other traditions that's holy, people recognize it and are pulled by the Spirit. I don't think people are seeing Islam as a religion that I have to understand now before Thanksgiving, or else, you know, something else will happen. But I think people are seeing this for several few decades, seeing a religion that comes in spurts through the media, whether it be through Muhammad Ali, the Elijah Muhammad, the Nation of Islam factions, and then those tensions with Sunni Muslims, through Sufism, the mystical tradition, through various other aspects. Through various forums, I find that people are thinking about religion in America in so many different ways, and that's what comes up as a question. The place of religion in the last 10, 20 years, turn of the century, is taking a new place. For years, for generations, people have said, that's your own private thing, you do it, you don't practice, that's your problem, that's not your problem. For the last few years, it's important to talk about spirituality. It's important to talk about understanding the holy. I see it in my own classes where students are interested, well, I'm not religious, but I'm very spiritual. I don't go to Mass, but I pray at night. You know, I don't read the rosary, but you know, I do something else and another. I never read the Bible, but I do so and so. Which is, there is a spiritual hunger out, not only in America, but around the world. And that's tied to the 20th century experience, and 21st century experience of intense individualism, intense secular ideas of this and that put away, a compartmentalization of life and knowledge, of family and relationships. So I think, like all traditions, Islam is providing a spiritual avenue for some people.
Beautiful. Father Foley, I heard saying 20 past 9, it's just about that. You're a wonderful audience. Thank you.
Thank you.
I don't have a question. And it did get rather warm in here this evening, didn't it? And we did generate some heat, but I think we had much more light than heat. Thank you to Professor Huda, Father Helmick, for sharing this evening with us, and thank you all for coming, especially the young people who are here, and I hope it was beneficial to you all. Pretty interesting.
Well, Father Ray, I really must commend you and Kamarul Huda for a very excellent presentation, and also words of commendation for the audience, for all in the community who came out on October 18th to share that evening, and bearing in mind at a very traumatic moment in our history, just a little over 1 month after September 11th. And the emotions and the fears and the worries, very, very fresh in everyone's mind and heart. But I really thought that the way you and Kamar were able to dialogue back and forth, and the content you were able to share with us was very helpful. And the questions, even though they involved some venting, which I guess is understandable, all things considered, I thought the questions also were very instructive, very helpful. And I think it's going to leave us with a lot to reflect on and talk about later.
Yeah, you know, it was not only a good audience, it was an audience that came with some rather recognizable needs for that evening. And I know that there are a lot of things that we do need to discuss just to wrap that together and pick out the themes that were really most important to the audience we spoke with that night. It was a real showing of respect on the part of everybody there to each other's beliefs and the situation they found each other in. And it was a real demonstration of that whole audience's desire to be helpful to each other.
Good, so please do join us for part 3.
Lay down and rest my weary head. Sleep now to dream again. in rutina mentis dubeas colum iugo prebeo lascibus amor et pudicitia se eligo quod video colum iugo prebeo ad iugum tamen suave suave transeo.
Welcome back. It's Father Tom Foley with Father Raymond Helmick, and we're now going to discuss what we've seen and heard from the October 18th presentation at the McCall School Auditorium on Islam. We had quite an evening that evening on October 18th. We had Father Helmick and Professor Kamar al-Huda share with us from their own experiences and backgrounds and knowledge. And then we had a very interesting question and answer period as well that really seemed to give expression to what many in the community were thinking and feeling and going through at that particular point in time. And so now we just wanted to sit down and talk over what happened that evening and what we remember from it and its significance for us as we go forward. First thought I have, Ray, is I appreciated very much the way in which you and Kamar gave your presentation in a dialogue format. The two of you seated at a table and each just taking a turn speaking with each other very casually and formally, but with great respect for each other's person and tradition. And just in your approach, I thought was very instructive for me, and I'm sure for others. I think we needed that at that particular moment to have two people, two very different people, be able to sit at one table and share. And I thought that was very good and very helpful.
You know, Tom, we had discussed that a bit. Even in the car riding over that night, we decided we're not going to get up there and give speeches to each other, that it was a much better thing to make the whole thing a conversation. We had done a television spot together just a short while before in which it was very much a conversation, and we were quite used to that as a format. But you know, we had a very privileged moment at that evening. It was the 18th of October, just over a month since everyone was so shattered by that experience of the attack on the trade towers and the Pentagon on the 11th of September. The group of people who came together, they were from quite a number of different communities in the town of Winchester. They had come from a number of other places around, and people rather needed this as even a kind of therapeutic thing at that moment to deal in common together from all of these different sources with the trauma of that September 11th experience. And what was very striking was that that had given an occasion for people to show a real interest in each other. I thought that right at the very end of the question period, we had a number of really lovely interventions. I think of the young black man who told us at the end that the respect shown to each other by people from these two communities, by ourselves, but also from people in the audience, was really the mark of integrity in each of our religions. That those who were using one religion to put down another, or those who, out of a supposedly religious motivation, were making these terrible attacks, were no representatives of the religions that they claimed to speak for. And then that beautiful Muslim woman, right at the end, with such a pride in her faith and in her community, really feeling that her situation as a Muslim had been spoken for in the whole event of that evening. That was a very lovely way to conclude the whole evening.
It was indeed, and I think those of us who were organizing the evening and thinking, we need something, and what should we have? And I was saying to someone, you know, I know very little about Islam, about the Arab world, about the culture, the politics of that part of the world. I perhaps would have had to have spun the globe a couple of times to find Afghanistan on a map of the globe. And I just felt we needed to have some information to just help us as we go through all of this experience. In Winchester, we had some prayer vigils. We had some memorials. The high school community provided a very good evening on the Manchester field one evening, all in response to September 11th. We also felt we need, in addition just to express that, we need to learn something. And we wanted something positive and constructive. And I really think that the forum we had October 18th allowed for that. One thing I appreciated from it was trying to find some basic common ground among Christians, Jews, and Muslims, the great monotheistic religions. And I thought that you and Kamar were able to speak to that. You know, some common beliefs that we have, things that we share that are basic, you know, before we get into discussing our very real differences, which also can be candidly discussed and tried to be understood. But I thought starting with that, you know, looking at Islam as one of the great monotheistic religions and what we do have in common in basic faith, I thought was very helpful.
Kamar was a wonderful representative of Islam for an audience, most of whom needed to learn about Islam. It was a largely Christian audience. There were some Jews. There was a Hindu woman who, again, she was wonderful. But Kamar has his very American experience of growing up Muslim in Queens and with all of his Jewish and his Christian friends, and something other than that stereotype that most Americans have of Islam in funny hats, very foreign, and someone who shares all of our American experience and is so genuinely and devoutly Islamic as Kamar, was just the right person and able to speak to us so humanly. He's very much one of us. That he was able to take up these subjects that so frighten people, like jihad. That was something that had everybody very concerned, and to be able to see the relation between the jihad and our Western tradition of the just war, that's a very contested thing for us. And we struggle with the concept of the just war. Can there be such a thing? What are the conditions, and how far, when we discuss just war, are we really trying to find ways not to have it? Something very similar is happening there in Islam, but also having an American to speak of that Islamic experience made it possible for us to look at the fact that we do have these common origins. Our Christian faith, as well as, of course, Judaism, are so rooted in the Middle East and its cultures. And it's an oddity, in fact, that we've become so unable to appreciate the cultural aspects of the life of the Middle East, because our Christianity has been so uprooted from the Middle East. Of course, there is a Christian community right there among Palestinians in the Holy Land, in Israel, in Palestine, in Jerusalem. But our thinking is so Europeanized and our American culture so derivative. Nowadays, our American culture is becoming very diverse, so that it's high time that we begin to make ourselves able to appreciate the culture of the Middle East, which is so much more plastically expressed in Islamic faith and culture.
And following on that, the thought I'm having is, I think many of us struggled with it that night on the 18th, was being able to respect the integrity, the validity of another's religion, even if one doesn't share that belief. I think in the audience that evening, some of the questioners expressed some frustration with this, and almost have to prove that one is right and the other's wrong. But I thought that, Ray, you and Kamara were able to give very good witness, powerful witness, to respect for the other's beliefs. I liked what you shared that evening about the Jesuit idea of allowing your opponent to keep his proposition, or something like that.
Saving his proposition.
Saving his proposition.
Sure. The people who were having such a struggle with this have to be treated with great respect too, because it is not our habit to look with this kind of understanding at another's faith and to try to recognize the work of God in the practice and the faith of another community. It's a very difficult thing to do when we have been so trained to look exclusively in terms of our own way. And these were people struggling to accomplish that. I found that one of the last questioners, I don't have his name properly even, the older man who was so upset by the fact of the suicide bombings, and at the same time he wasn't reacting simply with resentment or anger. He was trying to come to an understanding. What is in it? Not trying to approve it, of course, certainly, but trying to understand what can bring people to this. And that, of course, is what I was looking for when I made that distinction among three levels of angry people. The ones who are doing violent criminal things out of their anger, the people who have, or the countries who have some kind of complicity with the criminal part of that. But again, looking at the anger that is felt throughout a great part of the world, offense taken at the way that in our own society we have dealt with them without understanding, without respect. And we have to address that, and we have to address it with respect. I had the experience in a discussion actually on the very day of the 11th of September with someone. He was on a panel show with me, whose response was to say, anybody who thinks that way of us, we must make them fear us. And this was exactly the kind of violent disposition that had been shown by the suicide attackers themselves. Duplicate, mirror image.
And I think what we have tried to do here, I'm sure that others try to do as well. I think of the many interfaith clergy associations, in many different communities, the way that religious leaders try to meet on a regular basis. I know that since September 11th, there's been a renewed effort of that. in the greater Boston area with cardinal law and Muslim leaders and many leaders of different religions. And I think that's an example of trying to build bridges and have understanding. And you know, I'd like to think that maybe it happens too on college campuses. Maybe you can speak a little
it
on...
surely does. I think we can use a whole lot more of that. You look for golden linings in these awful things that happened. I don't know anything really much worse that's happened to us than that 11th of September, terrible experience. But it has cued people in to look for each other and to try to come to understanding. It is also true that Muslims in this country have been stereotyped. Our various talking heads have, ever since the 11th of September, rather uniformly gotten up on the screen and said, we must not do this stereotyping, we must not classify all Muslims with attackers. But a lot of it does happen. I know all kinds of Muslims who, since that time, had been afraid to go out of the house, afraid to let their children go to school for fear of what might be done to them. And we certainly needed a lot of exhortation, not to respond that way, but to seek one another out with respect and try to understand what's really going on in one another's experience. That evening was a rather extraordinary manifestation of that.
And I know, too, there are groups in Winchester. There's the Winchester Multicultural Network, which tries to do a lot of good work in that area of, in terms of many different issues and aspects of life, but trying to bring people together, help them to be aware of uniqueness and differences and individuality and respect for people, whether it be in religion or in their culture or their background or what have you. So just thinking in terms of moving into the future and how we as people can try to process some of this. I think to take advantage of any of these type of groups that do try to find common ground and try to promote respect for others, you know, in their similarities and their differences is a good thing.
Yeah. We have a lot of very violent reactions going on to one another. A lot of the attack that we've made, we have attacked the particular organization which we identify with the attack on the towers, the Al-Qaeda attack on Afghanistan. There's a lot of inclination among many people to say, who are we going to attack next? Let's keep going. And these are very dangerous reactions. If we really do address the underlying offense that has been given, this is the way we're going to come to grips with this basic problem of terrorism, of violent action against ourselves, violent action against anyone as a result of these resentments. If we leave these problems unaddressed, if we simply take the attitude that we need to crush anybody who attacks us in that way, we're going to have plenty more of it. You know, you can say that you go about these things trying to make the country safe for its citizens. And if you go about it in that way, we can make it anything but that.
Isn't it also true that misunderstanding really is a root cause of a lot of the conflict that exists? I'm thinking back of the forum on the 18th and some of the questions and comments quoting the Koran, for example, you know, just taking passages, isolated passages, and just quoting them, but without any real interpretation or trying to understand those passages. And Kamar was able to respond to some of that very effectively. But I think even that evening in our gathering, I think I experienced some of the type of misunderstanding and lack of awareness that can, you know, that can cause division rather than try to bridge it.
Can go look for the worst in each other, and it's easy to find, of course. You know, look around your New Testament a little bit. I have come to cast fire on the earth, and I will not be satisfied until it's all burnt up. I'm not quoting exactly, but that's the general gist of it. And I come not to bring peace, but the sword, fathers against sons and sons against father, daughters-in-law against mothers-in-law. Somehow that's picked out. If you judged the New Testament and if you judged Christian faith and tradition by those passages, you could get a very jaundiced view of it. And of course, you put them in context, you find out what that's talking about, and you find that, you know, the violent metaphor of those expressions is not what the teaching of Jesus or what the tradition of Christian faith is about. That it is much better expressed in if you come to the altar with your gift and you find out that your brother, sister, has something against you. It's not that you have something against them, but that they've got something against you. Leave your gift. Go get reconciled first. Now, there's where basics of the Christian tradition of faith are. And faith not simply as something that is believed, but that is lived in love and concern and in compassion and forgiveness.
I wonder if we might touch on one other area. I think you had mentioned it on the 18th and maybe even in our conversation today, and that is the just war theory. I know that it came up as trying to relate to the concept of jihad, and that we in our Christian tradition have something similar in the just war theory. And but I know that there must be, you know, a few people who say, how can we justify war? Even if at times it seems necessary, it seems the only thing to do for self-defense or whatever, but maybe some Christians might say Jesus really preached and practiced nonviolence. How can a follower of Jesus
turn the other cheek?
Right. Maybe we could just comment on that a little bit.
Sure. Do you know, in the early days of the Christian community, we didn't have to do any of those things because we were the outcasts. We were the marginalized people. And the break really came after Christianity had become the religion of empire. And St. Augustine was the one who really faced it first in a most explicit way. The whole basis of Christian just war theory is in Augustine's observation that when you have justice attacked or justice disrupted, you must work for the restoration of justice. And that was justification for war. He was thinking specifically of all of the barbarian attacks, our folks, on the Roman Empire. And if that empire went, that was the end of civilization. And that was the justice that he saw attacked and that people had to restore. If you're going to accept that, you know, this is irrefutable. When you see others attacked, if I see a person attacked, if I see a country invaded, what am I going to do? Am I simply going to say, well, isn't that just too bad, and what's for dinner? That's an irresponsible way of reacting to it. If I take responsibility for it and I want it to be nonviolent, how am I going to do that? I have to find the alternatives. So that the rest of just war theory after Augustine is all a quest for ways to prevent the war, to find the alternative to it, or if it's once on, to keep it from becoming ultimately destructive.
Good. Well, that makes sense, and I think it's an effort to try to be reasonable, try to be intelligent, and to try to balance peace with justice, and that's something we all want to work for and pray for. I'd like to thank you for joining us and in viewing this program. Certainly our thanks to Father Ray Helmick for being so generous with his time and sharing so much with us, and also to Professor Kamar Al-Huda from Boston College for having been with us on October 18th at a point in time where we really needed him. We really needed this program, and I think our community has benefited from it, and we're very grateful. Thank you.
Thank you, too.
I've never felt before. The beautiful one you are.
We have a country that we are tremendously proud of. We know it as land of freedom, of tolerance, of democracy, of all kinds of good things, can't even name them all. We have had that reputation throughout the world for practically all of our history. Now there is a very significant part of the world that does not see us that way. We need to talk with them.
Lay down and rest my weary head. Sleep now to dream is waking up and tired is my heart. Time to carry me tomorrow. Come carry me away. Come carry me away. I'm ready now for more. Come carry me away. Come carry me away. I'm ready now for
In the greater Boston area,